A very warm welcome to Cal Sports 3.0. I am your co-host for this evening, Alan Moore, and I'm going to go in just a second to everybody who is with us at the moment. Everyone is online, people racing back from outside, but they, of course, out of loyalty, they're here with us. We've got a pretty big show for us tonight because an awful has been happening this week in sports. We're going to start off, of course, with Rugby Ireland heading for the Grand Slam. Then we're going to have a chat about Barcelona and how they have not just broken, not just shattered, but destroyed the law, and they're really, really in trouble. But we know what's going to happen. They're going to get off scot-free in the end. And, of course, then we are going to speak about Gary Lineker and his tweet, because he got himself into a lot of trouble. But something happened this weekend that really, warmed the cockles of my heart. So I'm going to go right away and bring in my co-host for this evening. Give me. I see him here beside me, Isel Cody and Andrew Flint. And there we go. So now, Simba is showing his
glamorous entrance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I'm actually in his seat, so I'm having to move.
There you go. That's good when the owner knows their place. That's so good for a dog. That's so good for a dog. I'm going to start off right away with you, Andrew. Absolute torture for English rugby fans. I know you didn't watch the match. It's just as well you didn't. It was absolutely terrible watching it, and a lot of people were upset by it. But again, a massive loss, 53-10 to France. You had no hope for England coming into this. You've now got no hopes whatsoever. You have no belief in what's going to happen. Where does England go from here, Andrew? Because they have Ireland next up to try and stop it for the decider. So this looks like they could do it.
Yeah, I didn't think any weekend of rugby could get any worse, and you've just reminded me that I've got to sit through another show next weekend with you guys when we will inevitably break the record again. Look, it's a wake-up call isn't quite enough, but to describe quite how humiliating it is. But in a way, look, if you're going to lose, then a thorough reversal of thought processes altogether needs to be done. I mean, look, nobody enjoys record-breaking scores, and I've had far too many of them in the last fortnight for my liking. But to be humbled quite so significantly shows that it's more than just the odd team selection. It's more than just the odd decision-making moments within the match. It shows that there is an entire culture that needs to change. And perhaps, the backroom staff needs to be completely revamped, the way they prepare. And if this is what it takes to kickstart English rugby back into the level it should be aiming at, then in the long run, it's probably actually a good thing. I realise this is somebody desperate to try and salvage something positive from about the most negative situation imaginable. But look, Borthwick is not the most exciting coach, and I'm not quite sure he understands what he wants to do with this side, and that's this has always shown it for me. Who is this leader? Who is his leader of the backline? Is it Marcus Smith? Is it Owen Farrell? Is it someone else? I don't think he knows yet. So a lot of introspection is needed, and perhaps this is the type of result, utter humiliation, that was needed in the long run, instead of papering over possibly an average performance. So that's the positive I'm going to take from it.
Okay, Cian, straight with you. I mean, England really looked dead yesterday, and they just didn't look at the game at all or interested in the game. But this could be bad for Ireland for next week, because England could go bounce back and the line could actually roar.
Yeah, that's the thing. The performance yesterday was so abject that they will rise to the challenge, you'd have to feel. Next Saturday, they have everything in front of them now. They can spoil the party next Saturday, because Ireland have set it up perfectly with their win this afternoon, 22 points to 7 against Scotland. So they can spoil the party. They can start the rebuilding process. They can't get much lower. If they were to get beaten comfortably next Saturday, then they've probably reached the bottom of the floor, and then they can start the rebuild again. But the rebuild could start next Saturday. Steve Borthwick has to make a couple of big decisions. Does he revert back to Owen Farrell at 10, or does he stick with Marcus Smith at 10 and bring Owen Farrell back into the team in the inside centre position? It will be very interesting to see. Henry Slade was withdrawn yesterday, and Owen Farrell moved into the 12 jersey, and Ollie Lawrence moved out to 13. So there is definitely a couple of key selection decisions that Steve Borthwick has to get right. As was pointed out yesterday, he's not just dealing with Leicester Tigers at the moment. He's dealing with a far bigger group of players, and he just has to try and get the selection right. For a one-off game now, they can put this entire Six Nations to bed once the game is completed next Saturday, and try and reshape things heading into 3 warm-up games and then a World Cup. So it doesn't get any easier for Steve Borthwick at this current moment, but he just has to, at this moment in time, try and get some of the selection calls right for next Saturday evening at 5 o'clock in Dublin.
Isolt, on that, I mean, we look at England, we look at how they perform, we look at how they've gotten on. This could spur them on to do something massive in Dublin, because they have to do it. This is literally England's World Cup Grand Slam and cherry on the cake. They need to win this, because if they don't, it's not going to sit well, and the rebuild is not going to be done in time for the World Cup.
I suppose I would slightly differ to what you guys have said on that. They're coming in again. Let's not take away from the fact that Ireland will have a hugely depleted squad next weekend. We obviously saw Dan Sheehan didn't return to the field. We had Gary Ringrose with what looked like a really, really bad injury, and thankfully Andy Farrell post game was saying that he was up and talking, which is obviously very important. But we're also, the Ireland squad has been depleted prior to today. We saw Robbie Henshaw obviously return, which was a positive, but we're going to have a depleted squad next weekend, and that will be a prospect for England to come in and to make the right calls, to at least come out ending the tournament by spoiling Ireland's party. But part of me also thinks that this is now this entire tournament, similar for Wales, is basically a dead duck at this stage for England. And in a strange way, I think, irrespective of the result next weekend for England, whether win or loss, this tournament has been a write-off from the first game for them, unfortunately, just the way it has gone. And in the sense that, yes, they have to rebuild for a World Cup. Realistically, are they going to have enough time to rebuild for a World Cup? I don't know. And it is Steve Borthwick has come in, and he has had, it's not like you have had an entire winter series before this. He has come in, this has been his opening gambit. And I think to a certain extent, with the tournament written off, while they will certainly want to come and ruin the day next weekend and ruin the celebrations in Dublin, I think irrespective of the result, the tournament is a dud for them. So it's not going to be as catastrophic if England lose next weekend. They're going and losing to the world #1 team, and they're losing and going away to rebuild. If they win next weekend, they're going away to rebuild. They're just spoiling the party in Dublin. And while that's a big incentive, I just think the work that needs to be done with England is so huge in terms of, as Cian rightly said, selection is a huge issue. But I think, even with the depleted Irish squad, I just don't think they're going to make the right calls significantly enough to come in next weekend and beat an Ireland squad that are tactically so much more astute than a team that Steve Borthwick is still trying to figure out who he wants to play with, who and where. And the problem is he's also trying to, I think, he's trying to be so far away from Eddie Jones. And it's when you come into any organisation, you don't want to do exactly what your predecessor did unless it was a perfect winning formula. And to an extent then, when you're trying to cut your own cloth, you find that you've got a whole new backroom set up in his case, and you're trying to make decisions. And I just don't think anything has clicked for him. And yesterday, I suppose the match started, and we had, there was at the start of the game, I thought, okay, maybe we're going to get to see, obviously the French scored quite quickly, but we were going to get to see at least the English defence hold it up to the French attack, which has been a problem for most teams in this tournament. And they just were so porous, it was frightening. But I just think Ireland will punish them in the same way that France did.
Yeah, today, like just mentioning, Ireland, of course, winning today 22-7. It was very, very close, 7-8 at half-time. Nipper took the whole way through. Scotland very unlucky not to go in leading at half-time. They were denied a try literally at the last gasp of the first half. Very impressive play. But Ireland, as very good winning teams do, they got it done at the death when they basically, in the five-minute space of time, they got 2 tries and that finished the game off. A little bit on that, and let's just quickly look of course, at the other game of the weekend, of course, which is Wales and Italy. Now, Isa, last week, you were kind of hesitant about, backing Wales. They did well, but Italy were also unlucky. They actually could have gotten something out of it.
Completely, and there were patches in the game where you see that real Italian flair coming through. Obviously, they went down quite early in the match with a Rio Dyer try for Wales, and that sort of set the momentum up for Wales to keep going through the game. And Wales had a lot more to lose yesterday than Italy had to win. And I suppose that's the way I view England's situation next weekend. The tournament is a write-off either way, but they needed to have a win against Italy, because I think psychologically, and the damage it would have done to Welsh rugby, particularly given the last few weeks for Welsh rugby in terms of what we've heard about players, their contracts, and obviously the results on the field and near strike, they really needed it yesterday. But Italy are a team that I think they're showing that they are worthwhile having at this level, at this stage, because they're pushing teams, even if the results on the scoreboard don't always instantly make it, I suppose, recognisable. Similar to, as you just said about Ireland and Scotland today, halftime, it was literally a point in it. And the second half, I don't think the scoreline, while obviously Ireland pushed on and scored, the scoreline didn't reflect how very tough the game was, even in the second half when Ireland had gone and pushed on. So I think scorelines are often a bit deceptive, because you have to remember the way the scoring works in rugby. But for Italy, it will be hopefully ending on a high, on the sense that they've had a very strong tournament. Wales, England completely back to the drawing board, because Italy weren't planning on threatening at a World Cup this year. For England and Wales, it's been a catastrophic start to a very important year.
Looking at the next week, of course, the game Scotland-Italy is the first kick-off at 1:30 CET, of course, 12:30 Irish time. Sorry, yeah. Wales and France against Wales at 3:45, and then Ireland, England at, I think that's actually 6 p.m. CET, rather. So so 5 Irish time. Very, very quick calls on that. Andrew, start with you. Who are you picking to come out on top in those 3 games?
I mean, look, Italy deserve a lot of credit for this tournament, but I think Scotland will. But they'll have enough home motivation, so I'm going for Scotland to win that. Not absolutely obliterate Italy like previous years they've done. France to beat Wales at home, I think, is relatively easy to call. And there's I think that's all the matches we have next weekend. There's no other matches that need prediction.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. All of you grinning. You're grinning for the right reasons. You're justified, because you know full well you're going to actually batter us to Kingdom Come next weekend. So I'm going for home wins across the board, basically.
Okay. Keane.
Yeah, I think I just have to follow that up. Just, I suppose, on the Ireland game, I think if we can do the business next Saturday, I just hope that's not the end of it and it implodes like it did in 2019. I just hope it's another building block and another stepping stone to what we hope will be a further stepping stone next September. But definitely, going along with Andrew, 3 home wins hopefully next weekend.
So 3 homers for you as well?
3 home wins, and I think the tightest scoring game in terms of the smallest margin will probably be the match in Dublin, just due to the depleted nature of the squad and the changes that are going to be brought in as a result.
Okay. Of course, England have stopped Ireland winning championships, winning Grand Slams as well. So, England are what West Ham are to Manchester United.
Look, England has stopped us doing a lot of things for hundreds of years. Yeah. Let's not start me on that.
Okay, we're going to a history lesson in a moment. All right, we're going to get to the record now, come back with some Barcelona. And before we do, I was going to give a shout out to Arthur, of course, our regular who is out in California. Arthur, very happy birthday from the whole crew today. Enjoy it. I know, just take care, stay dry, because it is snowing and raining. It's like end of days kind of stuff in California. So, just stay warm. Okay, we're back at the break with some more Capital Sports and talking about Barcelona. Now, we know what happens when Spanish clubs, Barcelona, Real Madrid, and basically Barcelona, Real Madrid, when they get into funny business and trouble, The state usually bails them out. The city bails them out. They never, ever go to the wall. Same with players as well. They get well looked after. If they don't pay their taxes, someone will step in with a bundle of cash and hand it in and pay for them. So there's a lot of odd things going on in Spanish football. But this past week, I should say, some very interesting things cropped up. Now, I know that Andrew Flint, he was covering this in his day job, and I know the two of us were actually looking at it together. And it's going to get very, very tight for them because there's an awful lot to go down, and especially in the realm of match fixing. Now, if you see, you'll see on my screen here. So Barcelona, basically, they have been charged with payments to former referees, official top referee Jose Maria Enriquez Negrera. Basically, over 17 years, they paid millions to this guy's companies, supposedly for consultations on how to work with referees and how to analyze matches and so on. Now, you're paying a former referee who is a host of companies that are very, let's just say, opaque at the best, and you're asking him to give advice on referees. It sounds very much like something that happened in Juventus some years ago with Calciopoli, where they were picking referees. It is very similar to a situation that I bumped into in Croatia, where certain ex-referees were able to speak with current referees and make sure that results went their way. So it's huge, and former president is dragged into this as well. There's an awful lot going on, and it's not going to end here. Andrew, can you tell us a little bit more about it, a bit of the background on it as well, and where are they standing at the moment?
Well, I think one of the more interesting aspects of this is that this case was brought about by the Barcelona Public Prosecutor's Office. Now, if you consider, well, in the world, Barcelona is an iconic club. Within Catalonia, within Barcelona itself, the city prosecuting office has brought this case. That means this is not just some trifling matter. Now, what on earth is a referee consultancy? What is it that a club could possibly want to pay a consulting fee over so many years? It can't be about what are the rules of the game. Nobody has the slightest excuse over that. It is clearly to do with interpreting how referees are going to address certain rules, because there are some slightly subjective elements of the rules of football, no matter what people say. Now, the reason why I think this is particularly interesting on a second note is that Barcelona's comments, which of course have been relatively guarded because they realise they've got a legal battle coming up, is that they've been open about their relationship with the former vice president of the Spanish Refereeing Association. I think because they think if we are open about the fact that we've paid this guy on a financial aspect, they have paid not illegal sums to a consultants company, but for what purpose? They're saying it is, well, they're not actually going into a huge amount of detail. They should be a little more intelligent than this. They've got unbelievable financial scrutiny over the last few years. They should be smarter at dealing with situations like this. Now, the payments themselves, it's not about the sum of money. The total sum of money is about, €8.5 million over 14, 15 years, whatever it is. So the sum of money is not the issue. It's for what the payments are. Now, how do you determine that? This is not a case that is going to condemn them completely, because as you mentioned, clubs of this size, they will find a way to wriggle out of it. Now Real Madrid have held a board meeting today, I believe it is, and they are going to attend the hearing. They're going to pile on all the pressure they can. The Spanish FA are getting involved as well. So Barcelona are running out of options. They're running out of friends, to be quite honest, in all of this. The financial levers that we've seen them pull over the last 2 or 3 years, where they've been using future payments from image rights, from TV rights, and they've used basically all of them up. successfully, I might add. They're about to win La Liga, although unsuccessfully because they've been knocked out by the greatest football team on the face of the planet from the Europa League this season. But anyway, we'll move on from that. Look, it's not a good look. That's the first thing. It's not a good look to have any relationship of any kind, to leave a paper trail, to be blindly open with it about the fact it exists. But as you mentioned, Dan, it is not going. It should be as straightforward as saying, "Well, look, you're idiots. You're going to get punished for this." They won't get punished for it because they're Barcelona. They're too big to fail. Now, the fact that Real Madrid have joined, well, obviously they've joined in the chorus of voices against this, and La Liga as well. La Liga and Real Madrid know full well as well they can't afford themselves for Barcelona to fail because of how far weighted the appeal, the financial appeal towards the big 2, 3, 4 clubs in Spain are. So I don't think this is going to be anything more than a slap on the wrist at best. A points reduction, possibly. It's not going to be anything that is going to affect them long term, but their reputation is being dragged through the mud, and quite frankly, quite rightly.
Of course, they are top of the La Liga table, and looking good to win another title. Many years ago, they were the ones who crowed about having no sponsor in the front of their shirt because they were clean and they were representing Catalonia. And then suddenly it came in that, they're going to have UNICEF on there. And I remember a sports marketing and sponsorship professional from Ireland, actually the top in Ireland, one of the best in the UK as well, who I went to university with, and he just said, look, this is a simple move to put something on the front of his shirt. And the next thing they got was Qatar Airways. Isolt, legally, Barcelona in all sorts of trouble. But do you agree with Andrew that nothing's going to happen with it? They're going to get away with a slap to the wrist at the very best?
I suppose we spend so much time discussing, I suppose, the doping side of sport, and we have over such a large course of time, and we've often had this discussion, and I suppose it's the same with big companies where you describe something, and most famously when the banking crisis hit, of someone being too big to fail. Barca seem to be one of these organizations or groups that no matter what they do, they always come up not smelling of roses, but they emerge from the pile of thorns and seem to have survived. In this instance, I think the biggest issue here is that it goes beyond. So a few weeks ago, we were discussing Man City and their infractions on the football fair play, financial fair play aspect. And that annoyed people. People were outraged. There was about a week of should they be stripped of various titles they won while in breach of those things, and then it all died down. I think the difference we have in a situation like this with Barcelona is you have other teams obviously very vocal, and as Andrew has just mentioned with Real Madrid, but also the fact that it goes a step further. We can handle people using their financial muscle to maybe pay players more, similar to Saracens in rugby when they were flouting their rules in terms of the salary cap. That we can handle. I think once we hear there is an implication of a referee getting money or a consultancy firm for consulting on officiating, that's when there's a line drawn in the sand. And I think for other teams, for players, for officials, it's a very uncomfortable position to be in, because you're also going to have officials who are going to be annoyed, who are going, okay, so some referees were getting their back scratched here. And there's going to be that sense of, is everyone going to look at every official and assume they were being paid out money? The thing with consultancy and referees, and I am going to point this out briefly, a lot of clubs, particularly I know of several rugby clubs across England and Wales and Ireland, that would bring in referees. So the likes of a Nigel Owens comes in when you're training and will analyse how you're playing, in the sense of saying, if you do this on my field and I'm the official, I'm going to penalise you for this, that and the other. That's a very different thing, coming in and consulting and advising on how a referee will view a game, as opposed to what's being suggested here, which is that there is money changing hands to determine how a referee will view a game. And it's a very serious accusation, and we talk about football fair play, and the words fair play, financial fair play, the words fair play in a financial aspect, I think we're a little bit more gentle on than when we talk about the football fair play rules being flouted and when we talk about fairness in the game, because that is nothing to do with the players who you have on your squad. It's to do with the person who is making calls, and that's where we have a line that people, I think people, it galls them in a way that we can't explain why it's different than breaking any other rule. But that one just really, it's too far.
Yeah, you are right. I mean, I've had the experience where we brought in referees in GAA and have a referee watch what we do. Because, for example, when I was coaching hurling, and I think goes in when you give a hand pass with the ball, and sometimes it looks like you're throwing the ball. You're meant to do a double move like this and then hit it with your hand. And sometimes it does look, even though you're not doing it. And I know myself like that. I perfected it, but a lot of young kids have to learn it. So you bring them in and say, watch what they're doing, and then explain it to them. And it's always good to referee as well. And I remember just being a referee in to speak with our team because I inherited a group who were always mouthing a lot. And I basically got a referee to come in and speak with them and how to play a referee, because they didn't listen to me, but they listened to a referee. So it was quite good. Keane, with Barcelona, Art put in a very good point in 2009 when they would have been using this referee's services. Of course, I watched the game and they ripped off Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Referee got death threats after it. It was just horrific what happened on the field and off the field. But Keane, if we're looking at this, we know that Barcelona get away with this. They'll sort of have a few problems for a few weeks, but nothing's going to stop them. Is there a way that football fans, for example, can stand up to this? Because obviously Barcelona fans, if they've any shred of decency and self-respect, they'd say, wait, this is not our club, this is not right.
Yeah, you'd like to think so, wouldn't you? But the reality probably is nobody will step up, or as Isolde pointed out earlier on, there'll be a bit of a furore for a couple of weeks and, this shouldn't happen, and where did that amount of money go, or who paid that money out, or whatever else. So it's probably just going to be one of those situations. Yeah, it'll cause a bit of a furore for a couple of weeks, and then it'll be normal service has resumed. There might be a little bit of an issue at the end of the season or whatever, but it's just, again, another one of those situations. Just, yeah, you'd like to see fair play come into it, and you'd like to see things being done about it. But let's be brutally honest, in the last number of years, we've always seen there's a little bit of an issue, and then it's swept under the carpet and it's forgotten about. And then the next issue comes up 6-7 months later in the middle of the following season, and the same thing happens again. So it's just probably go on to the roundabout for the next while and come off again, and probably nothing done into the future. But it would be lovely to see something being done about it on a large scale, a title being taken off Barcelona, a previous title, or if they were to go on and win this title, maybe taken off at the end of the season, or something done. But 99 times out of 100, nothing really big will probably be done.
There was a message, a tweet this week from an English journalist, and he said possibly I said, like, as a punishment, they could play a season behind closed doors, and that would really, really hurt Barcelona. But at the same time, I know what will happen. Barcelona fans and then the hipsters, they'll actually buy season tickets. They'll all buy it, so they won't make a difference. It won't hit them. They'll still have the ticket money there. Okay, so on that, we'll set off football for a moment. We spoke a few weeks ago about an absolute horrible incident at a Russian Cup match, and we spoke about last week with Brian Wasala, and it was very interesting for Isolde and I to hear his views on how to deal with racism and how to try to move forward and how to deal with people. We spoke about, of course, shaming them, because that was something that Rich Boxon said to us, like, just bring them into a room and sit there and explain why you did this. I'll play Rich's piece now again, just to remind everyone of this, because it's well worth listening to. Brian kind of like took us back a little bit on this and said, no, it's even deeper than that. It's a societal issue. But just listen to it for just a few seconds. And then I'm going to show you what happened as a result of that match in Ulyanovsk.
It just goes round and round. I had a conversation last year with a pal of mine who was actually at Sheffield United, and one of the players got some racist abuse on Instagram. Really good player, David McGoldrick, is at Derby County. Irish international, yeah. And he got some racist abuse on Instagram or something like that. So it all came out on social media and club news. And I spoke to a kid who actually he works for an agency, and I went, the way to stop all this is what I do. This is on Planet Poxon. Is that whoever sent that tweet, threw that banana, did whatever at that level, and it's racial harassment or whatever, they should be made to go and sit in a room with the player and his family, whether that family is his wife, his mum and dad, his two little daughters or two little sons at 7-year-old, and say, right, go on then, mate, we're all here together now. Why did you call me a black whatever, or why did you call me a Irish whatever, or why did you go on? Just explain. My mum and dad are here with me, or my girlfriend, or my two little kids. Just talk me through why you did that. If you had to face that level of shame, not being on social media or for the media, if you had to go in a room as a grown adult, now imagine me as a 50-year-old man having to go and sit across from a plane going, one of his kids sat on his knees and his mum and his girlfriend sat outside him going, yeah, well, I did call you this, and yeah, I did send you that, and it'd be absolute. To a normal human being, it'd be mortifying. And to me, the only way to do it is to shame people. And I think the best way to shame them is you have to face up for what you've said.
Now, that came as a discussion from an incident in Ulianovsk a couple of weeks ago. My team, I was commentating on a match. They're playing Zenit St. Petersburg. They lost 3-0. However, towards the end of the game, a Brazilian player was coming off for Zenit. Ulianovsk have a Brazilian player as well. However, some clown in the crowd threw a banana onto the field where the Brazilian player is walking off. The club came out right away and condemned and said they were going to do everything they could to find this person and bring him to justice. The police got straight away into it. The Russian Footballers Union, of course, they got into it, and the Russian Football Union as well. So everybody was like, this is it, this is wrong. The fans, of course, went off in a bit of a conspiratorial bent, but which was pushed by fans in Moscow saying, no, it wasn't someone from Ulyanovsk, it was one of the Zenit fans. Yes, there was a group of Zenit fans quite nearby, but everybody knew it wasn't them. But the blame was put on them because it was like, oh, no, we couldn't do that. No one from our city could do that because we're so mixed, we're so ethnically and culturally diverse and work together and work for the betterment of the city and our region. This can't be Ulyanovsk. Unfortunately, it was. This then happened, and I'll translate it for you in just a second.
Оказался за то, что бросил посторонний предмет на поле. В стадном чувстве я видел, что бросали на поле снежки, болельщики «Зенита», и на эмоциях я тоже бросил посторонний предмет, им оказался банан.
Сожалеете о произошедшем?
Сожалею. Я в тот момент поступил неправильно на эмоциях.
He was emotional. He was annoyed. He was angry because they were losing. He threw the banana on the field out of emotion. Now, yes, emotion, but not out of frustration or anger of losing. He's a gobshite because he brought the banana to the match to do something with it. Okay? Make no bones about it. He's a young guy born in 2004. I know who he is, as in name-wise, but unfortunately, he's now been he's charged and he will be tried as an adult, obviously, for his behaviour of inciting racial hatred. Russia is very, very strict on that because of the very, very mixed nature of the nation, especially with different religions, different cultures, different races, and different views and beliefs. However, this is not a belief or a view that most people would roll in behind in Ulyanovsk. We discussed this before. He's there saying, "Yes, I'm ashamed of what I did. I'm sorry for what I did." That's a load of bollocks, to be honest with you. I know for a fact he's just sad because he got caught. He's a half-wit. He's a half-wit, but not in that he's emotionally disturbed or something. He's just an idiot who decided he's going to be the big man. Brought a banana to a game because he was going to try and make a statement. Can start with you this because, of course, we were together with Richard talking about this. Mm-hmm. Okay, in the best possible sense, this guy he won't get jail time, but he will get a fine. He will get it on his record, and he will do community service of up to 100 hours. Is that enough?
probably not in the case that he is going to be tried as an adult. It's a desperate situation, a stupid thing to do. There's no other way of putting that. You can't try and make a logical or take a logical explanation from that. There's nothing logical about something like that. You took it to the match. I was going to eat it. Yeah, you were. He did exactly what he was planning to do. What does he get out of it? Probably it's a stain on the rest of his life. Again, like most of these rash judgments, it's something that's going to be around him for the rest of his life. So one moment of absolute stupidity is going to just stay in the rest of his life, and it's going to be very, very difficult for him to continue on. Of course, as you say, he'll probably get community service, and hopefully he will be put into a situation where he will be faced with the very people he was probably taunting, and we'll see what might come out of community service with people of colour or something like that. So it will be a very, very interesting situation to see what the punishment actually is and what way they treat him.
Esel, you were on, of course, last week with Brian, and we discussed this, and we were both taken aback and kind of that lovely word that they use now, schools. We were basically, and I mean, and I said that in the nicest, most polite sense, where we actually had a very good discussion with somebody who, comes from Africa, had lived and worked in Europe, went back to Africa, and had a very essentially nuanced point of view than we have. What can be done with this? Because, is there some defense? We say it was in the heat of the moment. He was upset, he was annoyed, because that's what he's saying. Like, that's what he's justifying.
No, you see, I think there's and from what we were discussing with Brian last week, I think there are a few different views you can take. There are people who, as Rich had suggested, who, due to the environment they grew up in, a lack of understanding of other cultures, a lack of exposure to other cultures, seem to think that certain behavior is appropriate or is not as incredibly offensive as it is. And that's something you can deal with education, perhaps with more people of a younger age. You can try and explain to them the consequences that their actions have for others. And that can bring along a sense of understanding, learning, and people can develop and change their perspectives. However, people who intentionally leave their house to go to a match, and unless games in Russia are a lot more, I would say, dietary friendly in terms of good, healthy options, someone who actively decided on his way to a match that he would pick up a banana on the off chance that someone would annoy him so he could throw a banana onto the field at a player. Think about all these steps in your head, the amount of times you have to think that en route to a match. Someone like that, I think the punishment needs to be extremely harsh, because there's no sense of I was annoyed, I was upset. No, you're racist. Let's not call it by anything else, and let's not gloss it up. And I think there's a certain level of we give too much to going, like, what is that guy going to get from community service? Nothing. Especially if the people he's associating with hold the same views as him, in which case this is a mark of honour as opposed to him understanding the consequences of what he does. The important thing, and I suppose we have to see football make it very clear, and any sport or any area where that happens, that person will not be entitled to participate in that community or that aspect of their life again. So whether, if you're a football supporter, you're not getting to games again. If you're a rugby supporter, you're not getting to games again. Because the community service in and of itself isn't going to have a huge detrimental effect, I don't think, or a huge effect on recidivism. It's not going to change someone's views. I just don't think it will, community service in and of itself. And the other thing I know, and I appreciate where Keane's coming with saying, this is something he's going to have to live with for the rest of his life. But your actions have consequences. And I think with certain behavior, and I understand why Russia it's taken with a very hard line on things like that, because lots of places don't have a hard enough line still on these sort of things. And we need to make a clear message in all areas of society, not just sport, but sport is a particularly good area to make a stand because people are watching. It's on TV. That match, as you said, you were commentating on it. These are things that are very accessible for people to see. We may not see someone shouting racist abuse at some guy walking down the street in Dublin on a Saturday night. Some people will see it because they're in the immediate vicinity. They will hear it. However, sports, this is why I think we have to hold sports to that higher account. It's not because it's in a special area, it's because of the visibility of sports. So this has to be stamped down on, and I think it's really, really important that we see a very strong message coming out in relation to this.
Yeah, and no, Keane, you're not being schooled, not at all. And Isolt, I'm in full agreement with you. Before we come to Andrew, because Andrew has an even deeper insight to it, because he lives in the region as well, like that sort of West Siberia, Volga region, or Volga region. A lot of people in the comments for this, for example, and I can say there's a lot of Tatar people, Russian people who are like, the Ramil, Sergei, all these different people who are commenting that, and they say, like, the fine should be $500,000. People are all agreeing with that. That they're like, learn to control your emotions, you animal. This is, and again, these are local people. People saying, shoot him. People saying, hold on, he threw something onto the field. It was a banana. And they're trying to say, like, tell what exactly he did so everyone knows. And there's people who are like, of course, thinking, well, this is very convenient that they've blocked his face out and so on. Maybe it's just it's an easy way to get out of the situation, that they've just put somebody in there, pretend to be caught, because for a long time people were trying to figure out who it was, but that's not the case. People understand, I think, deeply that they know what it is. A lot of people then are extremely annoyed with this, to be honest. And when we go back, I mean, it's always been a case, and it's not just Russia, it's not just Ireland, it's not just England. One of the ones that for me stood out for me, and as a young, or a boy, or a young man, I didn't quite get it until I was getting this kind of abuse myself in different places. For example, in Northern Ireland, called I'm like a free stater and so on, and this kind of like, wait, hold on, why are you calling me names just because of where I'm from? And the one photo that I think a lot of people will remember is one that, how could you say, it's embarrassing, and one that he came through so well, and that's of course with John Barnes. And I mean, when he always said that, like, there's invisible banana skins thrown at people every day, but this is a picture of him where he's actually backheeling the banana, you see it behind him, off the field. There are so many similarities to this, folks, between what happened in England in the 1980s and Ulianos right now. Andrew, how can we get past it? Because you're a regular at this level of football. Like, I mean, the second and first division, not just Premier League. Is this a huge problem, and how will this be solved?
I actually think one thing you just made, that comparison, is the key to all of this. You just drew the comparison between 1980s England and current day Russia, and I think time is actually genuinely the main factor here. There is a cultural distrust of foreigners amongst many Russian people, which stems from historical factors. Russia is one of the most invaded countries over history, but that's not a reason to be racist. Obviously, please don't misunderstand what I've just said there. But it builds into a mentality of us against the world. There is an element of that, is there a problem? Yes, there is a problem. The problem is not just simply Russians are racist. The problem is a lack of understanding. And I think what Richard Poxon said last week was the absolute ideal solution. I don't actually think coming down really, really hard to make a statement punishment would have the right effect at this point, because there's a lack of understanding. But it's the understanding that's the problem. I go to away games at this level, like you say, the third level of Russian football, where there are, you'd be lucky to have 1,000 people. That would be a big attendance. And an away game, there might be 10, 15 people, and those people are regulars. They are diehard. They love their team. And I would go on the train to away games, and one of the guys who I'd seen in the stadium, but I hadn't actually met him personally before, he came by and said, "Oh, you're the English guy who comes," and it was good bit of camaraderie, and he hands me a sticker. He said, "Oh, this is our fan group." I was like, "Oh, brilliant, fantastic. I want to learn about the culture of the fan group." It was a skull and crossbones with a white boys, a Nazi group, and he was proud of it. He was genuinely proud of it. I don't actually think he really he knew it was a racist symbol. He knew it was, but he associated it with sort of nationalist pride, not in the sort of the uber right wing and social media platform sense, but genuinely proud of where he's from. But he misunderstood what he was actually saying. The thing is that, look, this example we're talking about here in Ulyanovsk, I think having him sit down in a room with Wendell, the Brazilian player who was coming off, I think that is genuinely the most effective thing, because it's yes, the embarrassment of being face to face with the person that you so boldly threw a banana, and like we've mentioned, if you're taking a banana to a football match, well, clearly it's premeditated, so education is needed. But the embarrassment that's a good part of the punishment. But what's the point of punishment if it doesn't have an effect? There's no point punishing for the sake of punishing. There's no point saying we're gonna, you know what, this is an opportunity. It's a match involving the richest, most famous, well, arguably the most famous, successful club in the country at the moment. Let's make a statement punishment and slam a really, really high fine on him, or give him a prison sentence to make a statement. That won't have an effect. That will have a negative effect. That will make a lot of people who are sympathetic with him react angrily against him, saying, hang on a minute, it was only a banana. What they need to understand is why that act was the problem in the first place. So I think sit him in a room with the players, and show people. Don't just hide it away and report that it happened. Record it. Record the conversation they have with a mediator in the middle, not just one player and one offender, but have maybe an official from the players' union, an official from the league, whatever it is. That will start to have the effect that a punishment should do. The Russian culture mentality, in my mind, fan culture, is not in a place now where a massive fine, a massive statement punishment will have the effect that we actually want. It will, if anything, I think, alienate some people. I'm not saying it's right that it happens. It's just simply the stage we're at. The one thing I'd like to finish on, so I've gone on for too long, I know, but the people will judge, if they've seen this incident, which they may not have done, but people will judge this maladjusted young man based on the standards of modern Western society, which is just not right. You can only realistically judge how this has happened, the entire societal situation, in about 30, 40 years' time. Russia was a closed country for the entire 20th century. The West was not. They've had time to develop and understand. And still, relatively recently, it was a problem, like you mentioned, in the 1980s. Even more recently than that, we've had literally exactly the same incident. So you can't judge without giving the opportunity for education. Once that has been given, and if there's still no change, then come down like a ton of bricks. But until then, education is important. It's the only thing.
It was interesting. I mean, again, very, very interesting what you said about that and the development plans and the understanding of what fans are doing. And I do agree with this. Is one of the reasons why for example, Spartak, I stepped away from it. I didn't really like to work with the club because we were working on one project with the fans, and I thought, oh, this is not good. Because the only time I ever had any issues with football fans or hooligans was with Spartak fans when I got attacked by them, and it was just, drugs, alcohol, and they're tough men and very nationalistic and very shit people in that case. I don't care. They were educated. They were doing well, but they're just shit people. Sorry, that's what they were. Now, in saying that, of course, February last year, we heard one of the reasons why Russia was going into, rescue people in the Donbass was because of Nazis and so on. Nazis haven't gone away from Russia because some of the Nazis we've seen ran away to Ukraine and are angry at Russia because they believe that Russia is a degraded society. They believe that it's wrong in Russia. They want to come back in and clean up Russia. We had it just a week and a bit ago in Bryansk, in a Russian region on the border of Russia, or in Ukraine, where a far-right Nazi guy who was featured on CNN from Russia had gone down to form a Russian legion, and he wants to come back and overthrow the Russian government because there's too many, as he said, too many gays, degenerates, Muslims and non-whites around Vladimir Putin. I was like, it just baffles me. I genuinely don't understand that. And of course, the memes were going last week when it was proposed in the Ukrainian parliament, or the Rada, that they were going to propose legalizing same-sex marriage. And he said, if you want Bakhmut to fall, send that to the Ukrainian soldiers who defended that, because they were like, oh my God, because again, this is something that's very, very out there. But again, one of the best places to be in Russia is with sports fans. Some of the best people you ever go to meet are sports fans. Some of the nicest, kindest, gentle, most open, most inclusive, most genuine people are Russian sports fans. And 99.9% of them, no, not 99%, but 90% of them are horrified by this. But there's some of them, as Andrew said, you slam down this guy, they'll go, oh, like, everyone picks on us. They've already kicking up holy war because they've been made to get fan IDs. So they have to get fan IDs. There was a few hundred of different Premier League matches, and that's another big issue in Russia. So they're feeling picked on the same way as English fans were being felt picked on when Margaret Thatcher was bringing in, you need to have fan IDs to go to matches. That's control. Sorry, Issa, go ahead.
Sports is only a reflection of society, so you're going to find good and bad in every aspect. And unfortunately, a bit like society, we don't hear about the nice people who go around doing generous acts. We hear about the ones who let the rest of us down. And that's just reflective. And it's just sad. And I think Andrew made some very good points there about when certain areas are closed up, you want to give people the opportunity to be educated and be better. The problem is this young man probably has more exposure to other areas of the world. With the world we now live in, you can be online, he knows the consequences of his actions. It would be for an older generation, I'd have more sympathy, unfortunately, in this instance.
But it was an opportunity for a quick laugh in his mind. I'm almost certain he would have thought, oh, this will get people's attention for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Get it explained, and then it can start the process. It's a long process, but it's got to be started.
One thing as well, and I'll say this, Andrew can back me up on this, that we hear, and Keenan, and you like, I've heard, and I've even tried to contradict this narrative because it's not true. People saying, oh, the older generation in Russia, they're backing Putin, the older generation. The ones who are so hardcore for Vladimir Putin right now, and it's the same in Ukraine, are not the older generation, it's the younger generation, because everyone here is net savvy. Like, any people up to the age of 80 all have internet access, especially if they're in cities or towns. Internet access is amazing in Russia, but they all have internet access, and they're seeing, like, for example, sitting in the metro, the guy sitting beside me looking at BBC Russian on Telegram, and he's reading it. And I was seeing him shaking his head, and he said the word like this. There's a word kind of like bollocks, like this. That word, like, business. He goes, bollocks. And he goes, because he's reading a story that he knows is patently false or changed in such a way that makes Russia look terrible. So he's seen that. And so when they're seeing this outside, and young people especially, because suddenly they had seen themselves as being people of the world, Europeans, and they're like, oh, we can travel anywhere, we can do it. And all of a sudden then, no, you're not, you're an orc, you're a pig, you're an animal, you're non-human. And that's really affecting him. And I do believe that with this young guy, he thinks, oh, he's going to be funny. I just think it's as he said, it's a sad state of society, but maybe I'm going to have a word with some of the Russian Football Union guys tomorrow. Now that I wanted to ask to do that. So, and I'll say Capital Sports 3.0 brought forward. We'll wait right now for a very, very quick break because we have a very short time left and a hugely important part of the show to come up next. Just back in a few seconds. Now, Gary Lineker, most people know him as a pundit. Those of us who are old enough to remember him as an absolutely swashbuckling, sniff around the box striker. I remember him most fondly playing with a broken arm or an arm in a cast in Mexico and being done out of it by someone else's hand. Actually, in someone else's boot as well in Maradona in '86 in Mexico. But terrific player. Started with his hometown Leicester, then Spurs, then went to Barcelona. Of course, we were speaking with them. Spurs again in Japan, but someone who built his name on his personality, on his sort of openness, decency, and kind of like a bit goofy. He makes fun of his sticky out ears. He does well. Having met him a couple of times here in Russia, great time for man. Very, very nice man. Very, very decent. Good professional. And on match of the day, he made it his own thing. He's always been fairly vocal about social issues. He defended himself why he was involved in Russia, why he came to Russia. He defended himself of why he was doing different things. Yes, of course, he likes his money, but also, of course, that's his job. And and in fairness, he's one of the people who does not see color, who does not see race, and who's very, very open in that sense of the word. He reacted last week to new British, say not English, that's really wrong, British migration policy. And it was brought through from people of ethnic backgrounds, which is the maddest thing of all, Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak, where he said, good heavens, this is beyond awful. And if you watch the video of Suella Braverman speaking, the language of it is difficult, but in a way it's understandable, because you say, okay, people need to be processed to come here. If you don't come here legally, you get sent home. Okay, there's a rule of law, but the way it was being stated and placed, it was going to get a reaction. He had the reaction. He wrote about it, and suddenly the Tory party came down on his head, came down on BBC. He had Piers Morgan standing up for him, which was like a big turnout for the books. But he was removed from the Match of the Day hosting gig yesterday. And one of the best things that I saw happening in sports media for a long, long time, producers, co-hosts, pundits like Alan Shearer and Ian Wright, guest producers, people who are meant to be commentating on matches, refused to have anything to do with it. They said, no, one out, all out. And it was a great thing to see, because we showed a couple of weeks ago Jurgen Klopp saying, I'm not answering the question from that guy. Someone else asked me the same question. An Irish guy asked the same question, and Klopp answers it. It was a great moment of solidarity for people within the sports media, within that kind of bubble. Keane, this is not going to go away soon, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. What lies in store for Gary Lineker? I mean, because this could end quite badly for him in some ways.
It most probably could. We've all seen the cancel culture that has erupted over the last number of years through trial by social media, etc. It's going to get very, very tricky for Gary. It will be interesting to see over the next number of weeks. Will he be reinstated to Match of the Day by next weekend? I know he wasn't involved last night, and tonight's Match of the Day 2 is actually in the same situation. It's only going to be a shortened program like it was last night. So it will be very, very interesting over the next number of days, weeks, whatever it is, to see, will it get overly tricky for him. His eldest son, George, actually said he's one of the most kind-hearted people that you could come across. Now, I know that's very easy for a son to say, but it was very nice to see that. So, and everyone, as you mentioned, Ian Wright, Alan Shearer, Alex Scott, and a number of other people came out in support of him and refused point blank to get involved in the BBC programming over the last 48 hours. It is going to get very, very bumpy for Gary over the next week to next number of weeks. So it will be an interesting one to see where this ends. Will it end with him being taken away from the Match of the Day program, or will he be reinstated in the next number of weeks?
Yeah, it is that, because it's something I see a couple of messages that he has. There is an agenda there, and also that he could be segueing into something different and get a big payoff from BBC. So the next Spurs guy, it is all about the money, or is it just the fact that
I'm going to actually criticise this bit. I'm going to criticise this bit because I was actually listening to Alistair Campbell earlier today. Now, Alistair Campbell does have an agenda because he actually has a podcast which is in a company owned by Gary Lineker, but he mentioned that Gary actually has a number of refugees who are either living in a premises of his own or in his own house. So it's something he feels quite strongly, and I certainly don't like. I think we have to stop always assuming that there's a cynical view here, in the sense that I think this is someone who just feels this policy is exactly what it is. It's abhorrent, not because I have huge concerns about people trying to cross the channel in the same way as I had about people trying to cross from Greece in tiny boats where the risk to life is just enormous. And the fact that they're being trafficked or they're paying human traffickers to get them across, and the debt that's putting huge pressures on families from the countries they've come from, etc. I have huge issues with that from a human safety perspective. But I think there's a very serious political implication in a policy being built around the idea and playing to the masses, where you're basically saying your policy is keep the foreigners out. And that's essentially what this policy is saying. It's not saying we want to protect lives coming across the channel. It's playing to a certain audience, the same audience that have, to an extent in the background tones, been very much in favour of Brexit. And I think what really potentially puts this in a really interesting position is that obviously there's implications with the Tory influence on the BBC and the close connections there. And there was an interesting comparison made online about various tweets that other people who work for the BBC have had, where they have had views that differed from what the BBC policy that they don't actually seem to have in writing is about not giving your opinion on anything, where basically other people, and in particular Alan Sugar, another man associated with Spurs, had certain comments that were not criticised, and he was never followed up on. So it seems to be, it depends whose agenda you're criticising, whether or not there will be a strong come down on you. And I think it's very important. Again, I've been saying earlier on the show that sports is a reflection of society as a whole. It's very, very important to see people fight back against the idea of you cannot have freedom of speech when you're criticising something of this nature, because there is a serious human aspect to this story. And I also think, I don't think we're going to see Gary getting cancelled. And I think the movement here has made it very, very clear. We can't watch football matches every weekend that have screens emblazoned with football against racism out. And then when someone speaks up and says, well, your policy has a huge effect on people who are fleeing from various countries, and I'm concerned about it as a private individual. It's not like he was tweeting from Match of the Day's account. He was tweeting from his own personal account, and he was expressing a view. So what we're meant to do is cancel him. I don't think it's going to happen, firstly. I just don't think that'll be the case. But I think we've reached the stage where, if we're looking at, depending on whose agenda it is, who's going to be reprimanded. And I also think there's probably a slightly ironic aspect that some of the people who would probably be the first to back a migrants out, don't let people in policy, are probably guys who are huge fans of Gary up until this weekend. But he also, I think we may be dealing with a genuinely good person who may genuinely feel strongly about this issue and have a personal connection to this issue.
I would say that even in terms of like with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Gary knows it didn't start last February 24th, and he'd actually tried to know once that as well, and was taking a task over it, and was attacked by trolls because he basically said, wait, hold on, it goes on. You know, he basically said, look, it didn't just start one day. There's something there, and he likened it to the situation in Northern Ireland, and you know, which was quite brave of him, because a lot of people wouldn't put their head above the parapet to do that, but he did, and there's great respect to have to be like given to him on that. And of course, one of the people who, the top of the BBC, and this is where it's very dangerous, Richard Sharp, who is the chairman of BBC, he was the one, of course, involved in organising a loan or money for Boris Johnson. He's a Conservative Party member and big backer as well. So there is that danger there as well. At the same time, BBC, Richie Sunak said like that we're not going to get, I think it's his exact words, we're not going to get involved with this. This is an internal matter between Gary and the BBC. Now, Gary, of course, he's kind of outsourced himself to the BBC, but the BBC is a state-affiliated broadcaster. Even how when Capital Sports was saying that we were state-affiliated with Russia, like we weren't. No state would want us affiliated with them, trust me. If we did, we'd have sold ourselves long ago. No one wants to be affiliated with us. And the whole situation there's about $4 billion a year from the British taxpayer, from the license fee paid to them, out of over 5 billion. And of the other money that they get, there's also royal grants, royal charters, and other monies coming from the British government and the taxpayer. So basically, this is a government telling their broadcaster what to do with somebody. Andrew, I'm going to leave the last word on this to you. It's a difficult situation. It's something that when Suella Braverman was saying it, I was kind of going, nah, Suella. She said, like, if you want, we can find a place for you, for example, in Rwanda. Now, that's great. Rwanda are advertising on Arsenal sleeves. So this is just mind-blowingly mental. Now, if Priti Patel said it, I'd be like, I'm with Priti for sure, because she's pretty hot. But listen, Andrew, where do we go from here? What is the mood in the UK with it?
I think there is some positive we can take from this. Firstly, like you mentioned, the not just camaraderie, but the sense of moral obligation to stand up together and quickly, collectively, across the board shows you're not going to get away with this. The way that everything from the commentators, the producers, people who weren't even scheduled to be broadcasting directly with Gary on Saturday night, but others all around him, everybody of the colleagues are supporting him. Where do we go from here? Well, look, I mean, I think there's a couple of points I'd like to make here. One of the common refrains against Gary Lineker, of the critics of him over this, seem to be saying, you're just a sports presenter, wind your neck and you don't have any place to comment. I would actually say completely the opposite. Now, that may be a problem with society, but whether we like it or not, those who are involved in sport are prominent in sport, not just prominent in sport, but are literally presenting the sport itself like Gary Lineker is. You may disagree with his views, but he has, I think, you do have a moral obligation if you are so prominent. It's not. Why are you disqualified from talking about politics simply because talking about, not dictating, giving an opinion about? Why are you disqualified from that simply because your primary area of expertise is sport? Nonsense, utter nonsense. We see politicians use sporting analogies, sporting allegiances all the time. Should we say you're never allowed to comment on sports simply because you're not involved in sport? No, of course not. That's one thing I'd say. Secondly, I think it's also another very clear indication as to why this decision has been made to force him to stand down. During the Qatar World Cup, social issues became a very prominent part of specifically Gary Lineker's presenting, and others as well. But Gary Lineker very, very prominently made his opening statements highlighting the injustices, the social issues that the entire world knew about, but wondered, would the broadcasters bring it up when they were there? Well, Gary Lineker did. The BBC made a very big point of a large part of their coverage being highlighting the issues going on. So, and a lot of them were very, very closely linked to the themes that he was talking about now. But now suddenly he's not allowed to. Therefore, by logic, you can tell the decision has been made not because it is impartial, but because of the people making the decisions. In other words, it is political oversight. It's wrong. You talk about the BBC should be impartial. This is by definition not being impartial, being dictated. You are dictating the view when you are claiming we should be impartial. You're doing the exact opposite of what you're saying you should be doing. Where do we go from here? Look, I mean, I think the way that the public and, well, the large majority of the public, the GB News, I don't know if any of you have seen this, but the GB News crew, of course, they waded in. And I actually think they dug such a hole for themselves. They did such a horrific job of being comedic about an alternative match of the day. Oh, wokey leftist Gary Lineker. Hang on a minute, you are the fellas who talk about free speech as if it's the most important thing in the world, and now that free speech is being questioned, you're proving it's not about free speech at all. It's about the speech that you like. And I think this is a good turning point. This is society turning back and saying, hang on a minute, no, we're not just going to bow down. We are going to make it very clear you won't get away with this. You might be able to make decisions as a broadcaster, as a lawmaker, but we as the content producers, the content receivers, are not going to stand for it. And I think this is a very interesting turning point from this point.
I do like that because there's some very good things from America. We see it from university campuses. Yes, I'm fully supportive of free speech. You're free to speak whatever you want, so long as it's what I want you to say. And it's an awful shame. And we understand that. We discussed it. Of all the, again, when we were called like state affiliated with Russia, I was thinking, there's no way Russia wants us affiliated with them because they were like, no, not that long. Because what we came out with was quite good. When we spoke about things, and we were very open, and we, said we want peace, that this is wrong, it just has to stop. We said it live on air, and at a time when speaking out at all was supposedly going to get you cancelled and in trouble. And we discussed it. We had Thierry Villery on us, and he's like making jokes about it, and we were openly open about it. And yet, if you then ask a question about anything, even I asked a question when I was home, before you saw the night bumped into each other, and I asked someone about why are, and I just said it straight away to a cousin of mine. I said, why are there so many? And I said, Georgians here in Dublin right now. I said, a lot of them. I heard them speaking. I met these guys as well from Afghanistan. Why is there so many there? She's like, you've been in Russia too long. You're racist. I was like, okay, no, I'm not a racist. I think these people need to be looked after, be taken care of. I'm just asking why. How did this all occur? Because I saw it in the mid-late 90s when waves of people coming in via the UK, being trafficked in from Nigeria, Eastern Europeans being trafficked in via the UK. And I thought it was horrible that these people were being stigmatized and not treated well. So for me, it was just a question of what can we do better? And as Isla said, this is a completely different conversation. And it is, for me, it's a really stark reminder that a lot of the time, people who are at the top, the very, very top, like Braverman, like Patel, like Sunak, and a lot of Irish do the same as well in America. We're in and we're pulling the ladder up. We're in, good luck, and you're on your own. I don't care if your child washes up on the beach dead. Tough luck. We have a former Pakistan women's hockey player, and also played top-level soccer in Pakistan, died in a boat wreck off Italy last week. So this is, just desperate people trying to find a way in the world, whether they're refugees, migrants, immigrants, they're people, and have to speak with them that as well. And yes, of course, there's people who are up to no good, but the vast majority of people, they just want a better life, and that's all we can say about it. And I think that's what we have to just look at that in the best possible sense. It's something that I'll always say I admire in Russia, where for people from Afghanistan, they don't give them refugee status, they give them settled status. You work, you get on with it. Sorry, Isla, go ahead.
I was actually just reminded me there, because I know I've gone on an Alistair Campbell moment a minute ago with you guys. I mentioned him. Rory Stewart, who does the show with him, actually mentioned in Uganda, who have they're in the top 10 countries globally that take in refugees, which I thought was amazing, but they give them plots of land. And it's an incredibly poor country, and that's how they don't view you as someone who should be excluded from society because you are looking to start a life elsewhere.
Isa, that's actually, it's a brilliant point to bring up, because I can say that from being in Saudi Arabia, I remember how Saudis treated Palestinians. They took in so few refugees from Palestine, so few. they sent money to them up in the camps in Jenin and the West Bank and Golan. I said, there's some money, just stay where you are. But they took in no refugees. Jordan, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, is in a really tricky place because when the people came in, they gave them citizenship. They became Jordanian. Now, a lot of the Palestinians who were there would be what we would say radical because they want to go back and fight Israel to reclaim what they see as their birthright, which makes it very difficult and a very nasty tightrope for Jordanian society to walk, because now the Palestinians number more than native Jordanians. So it's that kind of like, it's a very, very balanced. But they give them a passport, citizenship, and include them in society. Should that happen in Ireland? Should that happen in the UK? It's impossible to say. It's impossible to say. And sorry, Andrew.
Just one thing on exactly this. We've got to be balanced. That is our job. The anger at the apparent wave of people coming in. There does have to be some system to help people integrate into society, not just simply say, "Oh, here you go," and off. It sounds awful, but release people freely into a country without some system to back them up and make it clear. Look, I do agree. If people are escaping where it may be a terrible situation, they have to understand. They have to contribute to society. But I don't think anybody would doubt that they would want to, because they've made this much effort to get here. However, Suella Braverman's point, and a large part of what the Tory line seems to be, is there's a wave coming. No, there isn't. Look at the numbers of other countries in Europe who are taking in immigrants, and it's a huge, huge difference. Far more in other European countries than the UK itself. And I think that is, look, okay, people may, if it really is a disproportionate amount, I would say, look, actually, yes, there is a point that needs to be listened to here, but this isn't. It isn't the case. There isn't a vast, disproportionate number who are coming into the UK compared to other European countries, and that is just that's something that's being lost in this maelstrom of, well, immigration or not. Should we allow them or not? It's like, well, hang on a minute. Don't try and say we're the ones who are suffering the most. It's ridiculous.
Every country should have the right to police its own borders and to filter or allow or bring people in. That's just a basic fact of humanity. So there is that as a base. Yeah. There's also a bit of decency in humanity as well to look after people. I remember we were living in Malta and seeing on the port down below, like where our training ground in Floriana was, down below it was the port, the naval port. And I was walking from Imsida, where I lived, and walking or driving across in the mornings. And you see every so often one of the Maltese vessels, the Coast Guard vessels, towing in a boat with nobody on it. And in the boat, the Maltese vessel, there might be one person huddled with a blanket around them. And somebody got one of he worked part-time like on the field with us, like fixing the field like a groundsman. He worked with the Maltese Navy, and he said there were probably about 40 something people on that boat. One person was left. And that brought on to me, Jesus Christ Almighty, and Malta has a struggle to bring that into the society, because Maltese society is very mixed but also very, very closed. And then they have like migrants come from Africa, and then of course then as soon as Libya broke down, the floods came. In Libya, Isel, just to go back on that one before we all run away for tonight. In Libya, Gaddafi gave people passports and citizenship when they moved in. The first thing that happened when the revolution happened in the east of the country, they came in and they hung the people who they saw as blacks, not as black Libyans, just as blacks, and they hung them. And they slaughtered them because the people who were there said, they're not like us, we don't want them. So there is that kind of horrible thing that really went underrepresented in the media, but it's there. So again, a bit of humanity and all. And again, we'll come back onto this. This is a very good discussion. Keane's probably thinking about he's going to like build a wall around Kerry and say, that's it, no one's coming into the kingdom, that's it, you're staying out. As Isel has said, that like Tip is infested with Jarvey drivers, not Jarvey drivers, but what you call it, the trap drivers. So
We love our sulkies. I won't have any. I'm very happy with them. There's no
This is the
borders
thing.
in my house.
yeah,
Don't land on a holiday to Killarney anyway, and after that remark, don't go to Killarney.
Okay. On that, I'll say thank you very much. Again, very open discussion, and something that I think we always do well, because we try to look at the balance of it, and we try just at the humanity. So, thank you again, guys. Isa, thank you very, very much. Andrew, thank you very much. Keith, thank you very much as well.
No problem.
And go out and have a great week. Isa, have a great weekend. Isa won't be with us next week, so enjoy your week off. We'll miss you. We'll miss you a whole lot.
More importantly, I got really confused there. Just for anyone who is a big fan of the biggest sports event of the year. No, it's not the Super Bowl on a Sunday night. It is Crufts Best of Show. I thought that the dog who had qualified from the last group was from Dublin. The dog's name is actually, well, it's shortened name. It has a 5-barrel name, is Dublin. So if you're looking to go cheer for someone in the final, there is a lovely Doberman that we're all going for.
This is dog show she's talking about.
Starting in 10. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. On that note, we'll say goodbye for this week. We'll be back. We have a very, very special guest on the beyond next week. We did a pre-record with him, but it'll be so well worth watching this, because this is someone who I want to get on for a while, but he will be on with us. It's going to be an exclusive. It's going to be a groundbreaker, a game changer, and something that's going to open all of your eyes and all of, well, I guess our eyes as well. But this is someone from the inside of the doping world, who's going to tell us about what's going on, how it's going on, and also, most importantly, how we can purge it from our sport. So until next week, I'm going to say take care of yourselves and each other.